Suffering too much, the traits you didn't plan to develop. Some people have been through so much that it quietly rewired them. And the strangest part is, they didn't even notice it happening. These are the people who develop traits they never asked for, never practiced, and never chose. Traits built entirely by surviving things they shouldn't have had to face alone. This video breaks down exactly what those traits look like, where they come from psychologically, and why the people who carry them are far more layered than anyone around them realizes. If any of this feels familiar, if you've ever felt fundamentally different from the people around you, like you understand things others don't, or like you're quietly holding more than anyone can see, stay until the end, because what you're about to hear might be the first time someone puts into words exactly what you've been living. Let's start with something that looks like a personality quirk, but is actually something much more interesting. People who have suffered too much develop a perspective that other people simply cannot access. And you can spot it in the smallest moments. Someone bumps into them on the street and keeps walking without apologizing. Most people feel a flash of irritation, but someone who has genuinely been through it barely registers it. Their mind is already somewhere else, wondering if that person just got bad news, if they're running on 3 hours of sleep, if they're barely holding it together today. It's not that you're a pushover. It's that once you've survived real chaos, small friction stops landing the same way. The big stuff recalibrated everything else. But here's what most people never realize about where that shift actually comes from. And it's not what you'd expect. When someone lives through repeated stress, chronic unpredictability, emotional instability, environments where reading the room wasn't optional but necessary for survival, the brain doesn't just experience that. It physically changes in response to it. The amygdala, the brain's internal threat detection system, becomes highly sensitized. Neural pathways built for survival grow stronger and faster. The nervous system absorbs one core lesson and never lets it go. Pay attention, stay ready, miss nothing. From the outside, this can look like anxiety or overthinking. From the inside, it doesn't feel like either. It feels like the only rational response to a world that already proved it can shift without warning. And once the brain builds that system, it doesn't dismantle it just because the danger is gone. It simply finds new environments to apply it to, which leads to something nobody talks about, and one of the most unexpected things that grows from all that survival. People who have been through too much become fluent in a language most people don't even know exists. Not a spoken language, the language of hidden pain, a slight shift in someone's tone, a laugh that lands half a second too late, a smile that reaches the mouth but stops well before the eyes. These signals pass completely unnoticed by most people in the room. But someone whose survival once depended on reading emotional environments picks them up automatically, without effort, without even choosing. They don't just hear words, they hear the space around them. Silence to them is never empty. Sometimes it's heavy, sometimes it's tired, sometimes it's the specific texture of someone holding something back. They walk into a room and feel the emotional temperature before a single conversation has started. Most people see furniture. They sense tension, warmth, distance, or something quietly wrong they couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Psychologists call part of this post-traumatic growth. Research by Richard Tedeschi found that a significant portion of people who endure serious hardship don't just recover. They change at a deeper level. Relationships become more intentional. Ordinary moments, a peaceful evening, a genuine laugh, a sunset, start carrying a weight they never used to. It's not sentimentality. It's what happens when you've seen how fast things can disappear. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because all of that growth comes packaged with something far less comfortable. Even years later, even in completely safe environments, the nervous system built for survival doesn't simply power down. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, and it shows up in ways the people around them constantly misread. They prefer sitting where they can see the door. They have backup plans for situations that don't need backup plans. They think through worst-case scenarios that never even cross most people's minds. From the outside, this looks like anxiety. From the inside, it's just a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do, staying ready because it once had to be. And running alongside that hypervigilance is a pattern so consistent, it's almost predictable. They minimize everything. It wasn't that bad. Other people have it worse. I'm fine, really. Over time, downplaying their own pain becomes completely automatic, partly because it made survival easier, and partly because somewhere along the way, strength became their entire identity. Admitting struggle started to feel like betrayal of the person they fought so hard to become. So they carry quietly. They always carry quietly. And here's the contradiction that makes these people genuinely fascinating, because it shows up most clearly in how they love. They will show up for you at 3 a.m. without hesitation, without complaint, without needing to be asked twice. Their loyalty, once given, is absolute and unconditional. But ask them to be vulnerable about their own needs, suddenly they're unreachable. Not because they don't care, because early on, depending on someone came with consequences. Connection felt unpredictable. And a nervous system that learned that lesson doesn't simply relax when a safe person finally shows up. It braces. It waits. It tests without meaning to. So they build this strange internal architecture, desperately wanting real closeness, completely capable of surviving without it, and quietly lonely in a space between. The first person to check on everyone else. The last person to admit they've never truly felt checked on themselves. But something else develops alongside all of this, and this part tends to surprise people. Adaptability. Real, deep, almost effortless adaptability. New environment? Fine. Unexpected disruption? They've handled worse. When your early life required constant adjustment, flexibility stops being a skill you develop and becomes simply the way you operate. They adjust faster than most people because they had no choice but to learn how. And then there's the humor. Darker than most people are comfortable with and more functional than most people realize. It's not insensitivity, it's resistance. When you can laugh at the absurdity of something that tried to break you, it loses some of its power over you. Every joke about something painful is a small, quiet act of defiance. A way of saying, this happened, and I'm still here. Now, here's the part of the script that most people don't see coming. And it's the part that tends to hit the hardest. Beneath all of it, beneath the strength, the empathy, the dark humor, the loyalty, there's a grief that almost never gets acknowledged. Not the grief of losing someone else, the grief of losing versions of themselves. The version that trusted easily, that laughed without scanning the room first, that moved through life without rehearsing conversations in advance or bracing for disappointment before it arrived. They miss a lightness they can barely remember, a version of themselves that existed before the weight settled in permanently. And there's no clean way to explain that kind of loss to someone who hasn't felt it. The strange homesickness for a version of yourself you barely got to be. But that grief doesn't stay grief forever. Over time, it quietly transforms into something else. It becomes intentionality. It becomes the reason they value peace so deeply, because they understand exactly what chaos costs. It becomes the reason they protect the people they love so fiercely, because they know precisely how much damage carelessness can do. People who have suffered too much don't just survive. They develop something rare, a layered, honest, hard-earned understanding of what it actually means to be human. They know that strength is not about staying intact. It's about reassembling yourself again and again, even when the pieces don't fit the same way they once did. Their pain became perspective. Their experience became compassion. And without planning any of it, they became exactly the kind of person the people around them need most. Not because their life was gentle, because it wasn't. If any part of this felt personal, leave a comment below with the trait that hit closest to home. You are not too much. You are not broken. You simply carry more than most people ever will. And you're still here.